Morning. Very happy to be able to bring you these celestial insights from the Skyclock. This the best predictive mechanism that we have for the absolute fucking craziness that seems to be going on in this world. But at least astrology lets us find the broader context and have a bit of fun at the same time, which is ultimately the redeeming factor of this world, I think, which we find in the 5th house of astrology. I've got a stellium in the 5th house, so I might as well try and make things enjoyable for you guys. So I'm going to give you a bit of a July preview, astrological, mainly wholesome, but also a bit foreboding. You know, most monthly astrologers like to give you the most auspicious election date, you know, the best day to do stuff. I prefer to give you, you know, the day or the date or the dates with the most apocalyptic red flag potential. Not that we shouldn't look for good days, but you can find that elsewhere. So today, this morning for July, filming this on the 1st day of July. So a few things going on this month. In a few days' time, we're going to get a series of oppositions to Pluto in if we're doing the tropical game, it will be in the 1st degree of Aquarius, about to go back for its final pass in Capricorn. And so we have Mercury in a few days, will oppose it as it passes into into tropical Leo, or passes through sidereal Cancer. And then both Venus and the Sun will follow. So we've got a bit of polarized plutonic energy over the next week or so, just to be aware. You might find that, especially with Mercury Pluto, the conspiracy theory vibe might be quite strong in the world. Not that it really ever isn't at the moment, but just to be aware of. But what I mainly want to talk about this time, I've got one date, 2 planets in retrograde, and then 3 things to look forward to in general, particularly on Lugal's world and our little astrology corner, our astro corner here. So the date, what's the date? Good question. So last month I gave you the conjunction to look for, which was Mars square Pluto. And the previous Mars square Pluto before that was October 7, 2023. It was the day that Hamas launched their attack on Israel. And we had a square of a new cycle. So roughly February this year, Mars and Pluto became conjunct and basically reset, and then we have around June 11 was the exact square between Mars and Pluto. Sort of said just to keep watch of that situation and see whether there was any particular Mars Pluto sort of vengeful, intense, bloodlusty sort of events. And interestingly, basically the day that Mars would have entered tropical Taurus, bringing it into a tropical sign based square. Again, if you don't do tropical astrology, that's fine. I get it, but I've sort of seen enough evidence now that major events do seem to line up with tropical configurations. We saw the hostage rescue event, I think 2 days before the exact conjunction, and just as Mars had passed into tropical Taurus. It was really interesting. It was a really interesting, again, you can find my politics elsewhere if you want to, But it was a really interesting example of, you know, the most intense version of Mars Pluto, which is just the ends justify the means, and I will do whatever it takes to do what I believe for myself, for my people, is correct, is right, and the collateral damage is essentially irrelevant, I guess. And so we saw that play out. So this date for this month still involves Mars. We cannot distract Mars at the moment. 2024 seems to be a very Marsian flavoured month. And a lot because Mars does go retrograde basically right after the US presidential election, which should be fun for you guys. Sort of speaks to delays in people being able to distinguish something, to find a result, to remedy, to move forward. A lot of confusion and delays and just moving backwards or not moving at all. But Mars currently moving through both sidereal and tropical Taurus, and on July 15th it will become conjunct with Uranus, which is currently hovering roughly 24th, 25th degree of tropical Taurus. And sidereally, Uranus is exactly conjunct, or pretty much one degree conjunct the fixed star Algol, which is interesting. This Algol is not particularly pleasant. Let's talk about Algol for a bit, shall we? It is in the constellation of Perseus, and mythologically and also celestially, it represents the head of Medusa, the decapitated head of Medusa. And Medusa was a Gorgon, and Perseus essentially took her head because it was so ugly that it turned people to stone who looked at it. And in an ancient astrology sense, it's called the demon star. We get the word ghoul from Algol, and a lot of people also think that alcohol is also derived from the word Algol as well. There's a few other fairly not particularly pleasant and enticing connotations of Algol as well, but it is called the demon star, and it is typically considered one of, if not the most malefic fixed star in the sidereal zodiac.
And then being conjunct could put Algol, which is in the sort of Eastern Mediterranean Greek corpus, seen as the head of Medusa, is also seen in Chinese star lore as the anchor star for the mansion of the trenches of corpses. And the ghoul in Algol, Ras Al Ghul, we still use the Arabic name for the star. The ghoul is the same ghoul for which like undead corpse-eating monsters in fantasy are named, right? It's the name of a corpse-eating spirit, right? Like an evil daimon or jinn. And when we look at when Kaput Algol shows up historically, we see incredibly fucked up, atrocious events. We see the bombing of Guernica, for example, massive civilian casualties. And so having the Mars Uranus on top of Algol, it sucks.
So Uranus is currently 1 degree away from that, and it will be essentially exactly conjunct Algol when Mars joins it on July the 15th. So Mars Uranus rather than Mars Pluto, we're sort of substituting that intensity, that deep sense of darkness or resentment or anger or deep emotion sort of being unleashed or being asserted into the world, replacing that with more disruption, sudden events, disruption, more like a chaos vibe. In a birth chart, we might consider Uranus and Mars to be the most accident prone configuration, because it's people acting, Mars is acting without a lot of without thinking things through, because Uranus is very spontaneous, just does things in the moment. Both Mars and Uranus are good at doing things in the moment and acting on instinct. So that's the key theme we're going to see here. And that's not bad. And so before we get into anything less unpleasant, the opportunity for Mars Uranus is to act in a very pure, focused, determined way, using our willpower, accessing our willpower, but directing it towards these Uranian principles of freedom, of liberation, liberating ourselves, liberating other people from situations which are not in their best interests. Could be use of technology. Uranus is ultimately linked to technology because that's how it was found, through technology and as the modern ruler of Aquarius. And also just more simply, excitement and spontaneity. So it's doing things, using this opportunity to just take a leap forward, doing something that is exciting that we wouldn't usually do, but we suddenly the path or the channel just opens up for it in our lives, and we take it. We take it and we don't look back, and we don't question, we don't doubt that decision that we made. We do it and we commit to it. Mars commits and does something once it's decided to do it. So that's the opportunity that we all have around the 15th, so basically the middle of July. What we do need to keep in mind is the collective implications of that, and again, the fact that this is exactly conjunct to what is considered one of, if not the most malefic fixed stars. Medusa might be worth, just going back, just go and have a bit of a look at the mythology of Medusa if you are doing a bit of preparation for this conjunction.
Algol represents the head of the Medusa of Greek mythology. Medusa was a beautiful woman whose hair was transformed into hissing serpents by the jealous goddess of wisdom, Minerva. Her appearance became so fearful that it turned anyone who beheld it to stone.
There's also the idea of people losing their heads, losing their cool, not being composed and not acting rationally. So again, you can see how that can just further play into the negative side of this Mars-Uranus vibe. So be aware of people losing their heads. Figuratively, it's like the token sort of standard astrology thing to do. Figuratively less, but maybe even literally, people losing their heads. Just be aware. Just be aware that is the energy that will be coming up.
In his classic book on the fixed stars and constellations in astrology, Vivian Robson says this: it causes misfortune, violence, decapitation, hanging, electrocution, and mob violence, and gives a dogged and violent nature that causes death to the native or others. It is the most evil star in the heavens.
And it's hitting a lot of very important sort of nation and individual charts who are very central to the world affairs at the moment. Lots of British royals have Algol sort of coded into their astrology along with eclipses. They're very significant countries. I know the EU is one. Also America. So this conjunction will be squaring their natal moon in Aquarius, I believe. So the conjunction will be opposing Joe Biden's Scorpio sun, and it will be right on the midheaven, the highest point in the sky of Donald Trump, aka the Moonchild. We'll get back to the Moonchild in a bit. So Trump has Algol conjunct right on his midheaven, the highest point in the sky. So again, he has this energy coded into his astrology. This idea of being seen very visibly, very publicly, reputationally wise, something to do with Algol or Medusa. And this idea of like losing our heads. Remember that time, was it Kathy Griffin, who held up this sort of bloody decapitated head of Trump very early on in his presidency, or maybe when he was decided to run? That's very Algol. That's the vibe. Not again, doesn't literally be like a decapitated head, but that's the sort of, that's you can see with Trump, how he does. It's like he fulfills that a certain manifestation of ugliness that people see in him very clearly, and it's one of the main things he's known for. So this conjunction, Mars-Uranus, will be on his midheaven, conjunct Algol, which is also on his midheaven. And the 15th is a few days after his sentencing for his again quite hilarious hush crime, porn star, Stormy Daniel sort of thing. So essentially this conjunction will be happening as that sentencing happens, and then in the aftermath of that, and then as the Republican Convention starts. So the 15th, the day of the exact conjunction, will be the first day of the Republican Convention. See, most astrologers would say, "Oh, why don't these people have astrologers?" I'm like, they do. They know exactly what they're doing, guys. Come on. Just about got the sunrise here. So I'll leave it at that for the sort of for the highlights of July astrology. Just things to watch out for. Watch out for the 15th. Keep that in mind, and just keep an eye on these countries or these nations or these bodies or these individuals who have Algol quite tightly coded into their charts. Right, let's get to the good stuff. The main other highlight of July, as I see it, is two planets, both going retrograde. The first, Saturn, is retrograde right now. Went on, I think, the 28th or the 29th of June. So it stopped, it's going backwards. And quite funny, actually. I think it was actually the day of the presidential election when Saturn was stationing. So it was its last act before going dormant until November, was sort of pointing us towards these two old decrepit clone fossil people, you know, battling it out in some fake presidential thing. Good stuff, Skyclock, thank you. So that was Saturn retrograde, and then in a few days' time, Neptune will also go retrograde. So essentially, how I see retrogrades, the collective story of these planets sort of goes dormant, just goes a bit quiet for a while as they start to sort of stop, station, and then go backwards. And so when that happens, when that story and that collective story sort of halts, it gives us opportunities as individuals to access these planets, the archetypes of these planets, more than we usually would. So we can sort of reflect on them, reflect on their highest manifestations and integrate those, and also reflect on what their lowest manifestations are, so we can consciously move away. I think that's equally important as just envisioning what the highest manifestation is of a planet or certain planets. So essentially July will be characterized by both of these planets going retrograde, and they're actually within 10 degrees at the moment, so they're officially within the standard orb of conjunction. And so this is my take on this, because we're going to have 2025 and 2026 will be very fundamentally, I think, Saturn Neptune sort of 2-year period. I think that will be the underlying archetypes of the next 2 years, and how we best sort of situate ourselves personally within the astrology, within the archetypal themes of the next 2 years. So what we have now with this sort of dual retrograde, let's say until roughly sort of October, November-ish, it's like our final preparation to embody, to integrate into ourselves Saturn and Neptune, its highest manifestations, while also letting the shadow of each of them, you know, go, or saying that it's not necessary. For me, I only want the best of you, Saturn. So for Saturn, I'm going to practice your discipline. I'm going to practice your sense of control, of realism. I'm not going to fucking live in a fairyland and just tell myself nice things because they make me feel nice. I'm going to deal with reality as it is, as it presents itself to me. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to be thorough. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm going to master whatever is put in front of me. That's ultimately what Saturn gives us. Mastery of a domain of life where it influences us. And then Neptune, such a tricky combination, Saturn and Neptune. The overlap is sort of this idea of refinement, refining something into a better form, a more a more disciplined form. But with Neptune, it's more a taking off the rough edges, I guess. Neptune doesn't like rough edges. It likes things to be very nice, to be not mundane. Neptune doesn't like things which are just normal and tied to this sort of material everyday world. It likes to transcend, likes to escape. Sometimes it can escape responsibilities. And Saturn is responsibilities. So we might see over the next few years a lot of this idea of people escaping or thinking they've escaped responsibility. We'll see whether they actually have or not. With Neptune, Neptune is things which are intangible, things which we can't see. So we might think of, art, creativity, music, very much tied into, the sort of highest manifestation of Venusian qualities. We might also see in Neptune taken to their extremes, their spiritual extremes, maybe. So if they put this, to put this together, it's the idea of like refining something which is hard to put into structure, put into material form. So what I'm going to do, I've committed myself to learning or to mastering a musical instrument, so particularly drums, but hopefully maybe other instruments as well. That's how I see the most obvious way to make the most of this Saturn-Neptune vibe over the next 2 years. And it starts with this period right now. We're in it right now. As these two planets go retrograde, this is the start of our final preparation period for our Saturn-Neptune moment. I want you, I want me, I want you, I want everyone involved in this channel, in this movement, in this community, to seize the Saturn-Neptune moment. That should be the main astrological task in mind or in your head at the moment. How can I embody the highest manifestation of Saturn and Neptune coming together? So if I want to go a bit deeper than just learning a musical instrument or learning something, putting our skills of discipline and control, trying to master something which is quite intangible. What if we just did it as this idea of bringing a dream, bringing a vision, bringing an ideal into reality, giving it structure, making it defined, making it tangible, bringing a dream into reality. That's our opportunity across 2025 and 2026. It starts right now in July, so it stretches across the second half of the year. I think Saturn goes direct again middle of November, so right in the aftermath of the US election, and a bunch of other things going on there as well. So yeah, this is the time.